Hello, everyone, and welcome to another installment of Brothers and Boss Battles Video Game Showdown, a podcast where my brothers and I discuss video games new and old. I'm Anthony, and along with my brothers, Pete and Tom, we are hoping for another lively discussion. For those that are joining us for the first time, let me tell you how the show operates. We take a category or genre of games and select 3 games within that genre. We review a game one episode at a time and discuss its lore, story, music, controls, impact on the gaming community, and whatever else we decide to bring up. After those 3 episodes, we have our Brodown episode, where the 3 previously discussed games go up against each other, and the 3 brothers will argue which one should come out on top. We previously discussed 3D platformers from the Nintendo 64 era and an adventure puzzler games. Now, our third category begins, and for that category, we will be discussing spin-off Pokemon games. These won't include the mainline RPG games, but rather the offshoot games that were born because of the immense popularity of Pokemon. Our first game in this Pokemon offshoot category will be Pokemon Snap, developed by HAL Laboratory and published by Nintendo. It was released in North America on June 30th, 1999, after its March 21st, 1999 release in Japan for the Nintendo 64. It was later released in North America on the Wii Virtual Console on December 10th, 2007, the Wii U Virtual Console on January 5th, 2017, and the Nintendo Switch Online service on June 24th, 2022. You got to catch them all, this time with your camera. Let's get some initial thoughts going. Pete, why don't you start us off on this one?
All right, I'm glad you came to me first. I kind of want to set the stage for this game. So it came out, as you just said, in 1999. So that was about, again, these are all sort of North America release dates. That was about a year after the release of Red and Blue, and it was also a little under a year after the release of the cartoon series, the trading card. So it was like peak Pokemon in every aspect. So if you were like a 10-year-old kid, like Tom and I were at this time when the game came out, like, Pokemon was just like, it was just a Pokemon craze. You had the toys and the plushies and the cards. All your friends had all these things too. And it was kind of like almost like a dream or whatever to like just a wish that Pokemon was real and you could go and catch them and play with them, whatever, just like you would a cat or a dog. So like Pokemon Snap was really the first, or it was the first Pokemon game in 3D, right? Up until that point, we just saw these dinky sprites in Red and Blue. Then of course you had the still photos in the trading cards, and like so this kind of like, I guess what I'm trying to say is this was like a huge step up into like the Pokemon fan craze, and now you could even interact with them. It wasn't just that they were in 3D and like battling, but you're just interacting with them in a more seemingly realistic way. You give them throw fruit at them, and then they eat it, or they follow the fruit to eat it. And so anyway, so like that's why the appeal of this game at the time was massive. So anybody who like says they don't really get the appeal of Pokemon Snap, they either didn't live through it, like they weren't maybe the 10-year-old kid at the time that this came out, or they just kind of forgot about all the circumstance. But so that was my kind of little spiel just to set the stage for what we're talking about.
All right. And what did you play on for this? Most did you?
I played, so, obviously we had this growing up on the N64, which I played many times, but just most recently in preparation for the podcast, it was just easier to play on the Switch N64 online library.
All right, Tom, why don't you give us some of your thoughts? And would you play it on?
Yeah, just to preface, I'm not going to go through all that in-depth spiel, but yeah, I played on the Switch Online as well for the convenience of it. But as Pete mentioned, we had this as kids on the N64, which is where I originally played it. Closer to the time of its release. But yeah, I mean, just getting into it a little bit. We obviously were huge Pokemon fans. I mean, specifically Pete and I. Um, you know, as he alluded to, Pokemon got huge in the US, like right at the peak time for, us as young children. I guess we were like 9 when it first came out. And yeah, I mean, it definitely took the world by storm. And games like this are, I think, the reason why it even got so popular.
Yeah. And just for good measure, I actually currently have the our childhood not N64, or actually Pete and Tom's childhood N64, because I didn't play it too much back in the day. So I went old school and played it on that as opposed to the Switch. So I used the N64 control and went through it that way. And that was actually my first time playing it. Uh, I think I may have seen these guys playing it in the past. I obviously knew the concept, but this is my first time actually sitting down and playing it in preparation of this podcast. So, uh, we got some initial thoughts from Pete and Tom. I'll just say, it's a pretty unique game. I was glad to play it. Um, we'll get into specifics a little bit more, but I don't know if it does much for a non-Pokemon fan, but as someone who is not as huge a Pokemon fan as my two brothers, but does definitely like it, especially Generation One, I didn't mind and sometimes enjoyed playing this game. So we'll get into it. I'll briefly run down the plot, quote unquote, of this game. Essentially, you have to take photos of Pokemon for Professor Oak, who is a mainstay in the Pokemon world, who seems to know a lot about Pokemon. You're essentially traversing different levels in this vehicle that's on rails in the game, so you don't have to control the vehicle. You essentially just control your character, can look in any direction. You could do a few things to make the Pokemon interact in certain ways, but ultimately you're taking photos of these Pokemon, apparently to help Professor Oak learn, I guess, the identities of some of these Pokemon, and perhaps unveil a mystery of legendary or more powerful Pokemon. So you go through a series of levels, and there are different Pokemon in each level, and you take photos of them to progress the story. You need to take photos of a certain number of Pokemon and garner specific scores, enough scores to allow you to progress to the next level. You get different scoring based on the quality of the photo you take. So the Pokemon size in the photo, their location of the photo, whether they're doing an interesting pose, all of that contributes to the amount of points you get, and you obviously have to do that in order to proceed. I'm interested to know, since you guys have now experience playing on the N64 and the Switch, how did you find the controls in general, and then specifically one system versus another system?
It's kind of difficult to compare just because it's been so long since I've played it on the N64, but I will say that I thought the controls were not great when I replayed it this year on the Switch. Um, I think that the game really could have benefited from having like a sensitivity control for the camera, so like moving the camera around. And one other thing, I didn't like how it defaulted to the inverted controls, but
Mm.
thankfully they did have an option to reverse that to normal people controls.
I think I kept the inverted. It's you get used to it pretty quickly, I feel. But I kind of agree with what Tom said about, you know, it's hard to compare, but I found the control on the Switch, and I think it's just the Switch. I hate the Switch controls. It's the worst. But I found it really, really bad. I do seem to remember on N64, the control still wasn't perfect. Like it just wasn't that smooth when you were moving the camera. I felt. I mean, and you just played it on N64, so what did you think?
I agree, but I contribute that to a function of the controller. Essentially, just the positioning of your hands on an N64 controller. To me, it's like you're really relying on your thumb to be perfect without any like a great amount of bracing on the like the backside of the controllers, like with more traditional controllers or a PS5 or Xbox One controller or something. So I I didn't love it, but I didn't think it was too bad. I mean, there are a few Pokemon that move pretty quickly that are hard to take the photos of if the control isn't very crisp, but for the most part, you're gonna be able to take the photos just fine, even with a
Yeah.
maybe subpar N64 control.
I felt like it was just hard to move it precisely. Like it felt like, I don't know if you remember, but in Donkey Kong 64, when you had to aim well, anything, but like when you aimed any of the guns, for example, like
Yeah,
there would be
I know
like a
what you mean.
set
Yeah, and it did feel like
like
that. Yeah.
minimum distance that it would always go, the camera. And I felt that, yeah. And so that lack of precision made it kind of annoying.
Yeah, what did you guys think about the vehicle you're in, the Zero One, being on rails in this game, as opposed to having maybe more free range to explore the levels and track down Pokemon for photos?
No, I think it being on rails is important because it made it difficult, or it made it more challenging at times to get the perfect shot that you wanted of a Pokemon. Where if you could just, stay there or move wherever you want, whenever you wanted, I think it would have made the game even easier.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think this was meant to be a difficult game, but I definitely see your point. I mean, if they made it more open world, they probably would have had to do something where like Pokemon would, run and hide if you didn't, sneak up on them sufficiently, or you could more easily scare them. Um, I guess they really weren't going for that. I mean, I like the fact that it was on rails. I think it served the purpose of the game, to really just focus on taking photos of the Pokemon and trying to get the best shots.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we'll talk about, some of kind of the secrets, I'm sure later, but in a lot of instances, maybe you had to, hit a Pokemon with a Pester Ball, quickly or before they ran basically out of the range that you could throw the Pester Ball, or things of that nature. Whereas if you weren't on rails, those things would have had to be different because then they would have been too easy.
Yeah. I was also going to say that, like it being on rails kind of it gave you more like, well, the need to have to choose as a player, like choose one thing over another. Like you could, say like, oh, I want to focus on this Pokemon that I know is coming up and or it's gonna be on the right side. So, but then you put your attention there and you might miss something that's on the left side. So it gives you kind of more incentive to actually replay a level to see like what you missed. And if you could just control the vehicle, by moving back and forth, then you would just get everything in one playthrough of the level.
Right. So you guys kind of brought up interesting points as far as, Tom used replay, and Pete used the mentioned pester balls. So to make it a little bit more interesting, rather than just these Pokemon being out in open fields and you being able to take photos of them, there are some items. There's Pokemon food, pester balls, and the Poke Flute, which you get at various points throughout the game. Um, and some of those items are very important to get good photos of the Pokemon or to even make them appear in some instances. For example, the Poke Flute, once you get that, which is the last of the three items that you get, you can play that, and Snorlax, for example, in the first level will wake up from his nap and you're able to take a photo of him. Pester balls can be used to knock Pokemon into certain positions that allow you to get a better photo or to perhaps even unlock certain other levels in a level. And the food you can use to trail them towards a specific spot where you are. So, it's interesting because the first the first chapter that you go in,
Yeah, that's the beach, right?
the beach, you know, Snorlax is in that level, but he's sleeping at the beginning. And for those that know Pokemon, he's sort of this big, huge Pokemon, but is like noticeably always sleeping. It's sort of like an iconic character trait of his. Um, so you can't really get a photo of him until you go back to the beach later on after you have the pester balls, which wake him up, um, and then you can take a photo of him awake. So that goes to the replayability that Tom mentioned, that there are six main levels and then a seventh level, but you can go back to them after you get the various items to unlock new Pokemon to take photos of, or to at least put them in maybe more advantageous positions to get better scores on your photos.
Yeah. Yeah, so the Pokeflute wakes up Snorlax, he does a dance, and if you get a good shot at him, I forget if the Pester Ball, he kind of like maybe wakes up for a second and I think scratches himself or
Yeah,
something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah,
Because
yeah,
otherwise, if
exactly.
he's sleeping, you try to take the picture and it doesn't recognize it as Snorlax. I think it gives you question marks.
Right, right.
Yeah. So, and I'm curious, like, because this was your first time playing, how well you did with kind of some of the secrets, so to speak. Because I remembered a lot of them from playing back in the day. So there's simple one is like hitting the Charmeleon into the like lava pit and then Charizard comes out.
Yeah, there was a lot of that. There was a lot of hitting certain Pokemon who's walking conspicuously by a lava pit or a rim of water,
Yeah.
or a pool of water or something. So later in, I think it's the cave level. I don't know, is it called the cave level? Not the cave that we just reviewed, but the
What do you talk? Which one? Are you, which?
I think it's the cave level, but there's a weeping bell sort of hopping alongside
Oh yeah,
a pool of water, and you could hit the weeping bell into it, and it becomes then victory bell comes out, and
yeah.
you could take a photo of victory bell.
Was that the
So
cave or the tunnel, or was it the cave? Yeah, either way, we all know
one
It
of
was
this.
those
the
two
one with
levels.
the Mewtwo, sign.
Yeah,
I mean, you have to take the
Sign,
picture of the
yeah.
signs. Yeah.
yeah. Since you mentioned that, I thought that was also kind of cool, even though it doesn't add that much to the
Yeah.
game. But I thought those little like nature structures
The
that
Pokemon
that
signs, yeah,
represent.
the six of them.
Yeah.
So we'll get back to that. Pete, you had asked as far as ease of figuring these out. I the signs were tough, but I felt like I was able to figure out most of these other little puzzles. Like there's some you kind of just do by default, and I like how the game kept it somewhat simplistic that way. You only get these three items, so if something's not going your way, you could try any one of these items on it. For example, in the same level with the Weeping Bell, there's also two Jinxes sort of dancing around an egg. And if you throw a pester ball at it, nothing happens. If you throw food at it, nothing happens. But if you play the Poke Flute, they kind of do this dance or a chant or something, and out comes Articuno, one of the legendary bird Pokemon, in order to, so all of those legendary birds and everything I figured out as well. It was really just the signs that I needed a little bit of help on, and honestly, at that point in the game, because that's really what you do to end the game essentially, or get to the last level. At that point, I kind of just wanted to be done, so I looked it up. I might have been able to figure it out, otherwise, though a couple were more difficult than others, I think.
I was curious if you got slow, bro.
No, so that I don't know if you guys have your stats, quote unquote, but I did take a screenshot, and um let me just try to
I
pull it
have
up.
mine.
So I found 58 kinds of Pokemon according to Bull, but and all six signs, but like I said, that That's not that big a deal because you need to do them and whatever. According to Bulbapedia, there's 63 species of Pokemon. So that means I missed five. So I was trying to figure out which five I missed, and I do believe Slowbro was one of them. And the fact that you're asking this question as intimating that it's hard to see, I'm almost certain that that was one of them.
Yeah. It's more like if you're like a big fan of Pokemon, you know how he evolves. Like the Slowpoke puts his tail in the water, and the Shelder bites his tail, and then he evolves into Slowbro. That's like the lore behind his evolution.
So what do you have to
So
do?
like yeah, if you have to throw the food in that was it the river level? Um anyway, and then so you throw the food over to like a designated spot that's near the water. Then Slowpoke walks over to it and puts his tail in the water, and then he evolves.
Yeah,
Ah,
and I think
that's
that
cool.
spot, like I think there's this sign that has a picture of Shelder on it,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
it's also kind of like I think a patch of like dirt where the rest maybe is grass, if I'm remembering. Like
yeah,
it's kind
yeah.
of it's obvious like where he needs to be.
Yeah, it's obvious where it needs to be. But if you don't know that that's that lore behind that, yeah,
No, definitely no. If you know, yeah,
Oh,
then
that's
it's
pretty
obvious
cool.
where.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
that's one I didn't get.
Did you get Gyarados?
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
Gyarados, I got. That's you have to throw the pester balls into that like whirlpool, right?
No, that was Dragonite, wasn't it?
yeah,
But that was Dragon.
Gyarados, you have to hit a
Oh,
Magikarp like early in the stage, and then he'll.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
I did get him though. I did get him though. The other one I think I missed was Doug Trio, and there is a Doug Trio sign as well, which I got, but I don't think I got the Doug Trio
yeah. I
Pokemon.
don't think I got that one either.
Yeah, that one I think you take a picture of the Diglett and he moves, and then like if you do it 3 times, then he pops out as a Doug Trio. I think it was
Mm.
Yeah, I think it was something like I think I did read that. And then Muck and Grimer, I think I only got one of those two.
Grimer, I'm sure. Then
Yeah,
I think you
yeah.
have to throw maybe you have to throw 3 Pester Balls at a Grimer and he'll evolve into Muck. Yeah, that
Ah.
was probably the hardest one for me because I didn't remember that from you know playing it back in the day.
Yeah, yeah. Those two I missed, Muck and Doug Trio. My total number seen was 60, so this one more than I'm missing. I'm not sure who it was.
And what about you, Pete? Do you remember?
I don't have my stats. I think I saw all of them though.
I think maybe Growlithe or Arcanine. I think I may have only gotten one of those in the fire level.
So just to kind of change topics a little, we could get back to this because we mentioned Grimer and Muck. I don't know if you guys came across this, but like, okay, so before I get to that, you know, we all played the game, I think, pretty casually, but some people like basically devote their life to getting like high scores and stuff. And that just adds such a different strategy and competitive level to the game that like most people who play the game probably don't do. Um, so anyway, I don't know if you guys came across like this website called Cyberscore, and I think it's for a video game website. It's not just for Pokemon Snap, and basically it's just a leaderboard of high scores in games. So for Pokemon Snap, they have basically the high score of each Pokemon, and so Muck for basically 20 years was like maxed out at 4,000 points.
Oh wow.
And a bunch of people had that score, and it's whatever. The size was 1,000 points. I guess the pose was 1,000. Then maybe I guess you get double for good technique, like being in the center,
In
something
the
like that.
center of the photo, right? Those are the three
Yeah,
criteria, and then you get a boost if there's multiple of the Pokemon in the photo.
exactly. So what one player discovered was that if like very early on in the stage, if you have to like basically launch pester balls really far distance and you could hit a Grimer and he'll evolve into Muck. And it's very hard to do apparently. And then as you go through the level a little further, there's another Grimer, which is much easier to turn into a Muck. But then if you get like lucky and you take a picture of that Muck and the first Muck that you made of the first Grimer that you made evolve into Muck at the beginning of the level, he may walk in such a way on his sort of ledge that he could just barely get into the background of the picture of the second muck. So I think,
Wow.
yeah, so he ironic or not ironically, but he got a score of 3940, not 4000, but then he got like 60 bonus points for the additional muck in the background. So when he first discovered that, he still ended up with 4000 points, but he basically kind of proved the concept that you can get more than 4000 points. And
Right,
then
right.
eventually he broke in. I think someone else kind of used his technique and broke his own record, I think.
Wow.
But like that
I
only happened, I think, in 2022 or even 2023. So it's like, I don't know. I think I said this in a past episode, but like I love things like that. Like when things get discovered 20 plus years after the game was released.
Yeah, that is cool. And it certainly shows the replay value of this game. And it's interesting though. I'm wondering how you get 4,000 points, because I thought they give you 1,000 for size, like that's the max. And then double for being in the photo, let's say. Oh, no, I guess that's true. If you get 1,000 and 1,000 and then they double you for being in the center of the photo, that's 4,000. So yeah.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's what it was. I mean, it's not that
Yeah.
really technically, how exactly they got to that isn't that important to
Right.
the story, but
Nice. Yeah. What'd you guys think of the music?
I didn't like it. It
Real
didn't sound like Pokemon music to me,
Yeah.
honestly. And also the Poke Flute. I don't know if you guys noticed it, but this is like everybody kind of, well, Pokemon fans know the Poke Flute sound, and like in every game, it's like a little different nuance, but it still kind of sounds like it. But in this game, it really
Yeah.
did not sound
That's true.
like the Poke Flute sound. So I did not like the
It's
music.
weird. Did Nintendo not get the rights to its own property? I don't get it.
I don't know, but the the voice of Professor Oak, and he says very limited lines, but he was the actual
Yeah, he's like, "Hello there."
wonderful.
Hello.
He was the voice
Yeah.
actor from the cartoons. Yeah.
From the car. Oh, that's cool. Yeah, there's
Did
yeah, go ahead, Tom.
I was gonna say, did the Pokemon? I'm pretty sure Pikachu had his, normal Pikachu voice, but did the other Pokemon have their voices? I don't seem to recall anyone other than Pikachu for some reason.
I'm trying to think back. I don't recall hearing any other like
Yeah, I
Pokemon
think it might have
voices.
just been like, how they had the cries in the red and blue,
Yeah.
like which was like,
Yeah. Little
the little
A little,
sound that they make
little.
when they appear.
screeches or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, so that I feel like they missed the mark on that too,
yeah. I mean,
sound wise.
right. The sound wasn't great. I mean, the music was fine, but like you said, I guess it's just not very Pokemon-y.
Yeah. So I wanted to bring up something on the music too, and it kind of relates to something else that's even cooler. But I don't know if you guys read about this, but there's actually some like scrapped stages. So okay, well we'll talk about the one that relates to the music first. The composer of the game, of the music in the game, had his or her, I forget what the composer's name was, but had his or her own website, which is now like an archived website, so you have to use like the Wayback Machine or whatever it's called. But anyway, on that website, they had the music from the game, and there were two titles that didn't make it in the final game. One was titled Fantastic Horror, and the other was titled The Theme of the Horror Boss. And you could go online and listen to these tracks. But anyway, it's kind of interesting because maybe it maybe implies that there was thoughts of having sort of like a lavender town or like a mansion, the haunted mansion themed level. I
Like
don't know.
for the ghost Pokemon, maybe.
Yeah, I mean the problem is I think there was only three, right? In Gen 1, Ghastly, Haunter, and Gengar.
And they're all evolved forms of each other. They're all
Yeah,
Yeah,
I think
one.
yeah,
so. I mean, usually they always lump in Cubone and Marowak with
yeah,
those,
yeah,
but that would have
exactly.
been
And then
one
I don't
to
know, maybe you could have put like Eradicate,
Zubat, something like that.
yeah, just take them out of all the levels and put them in there. But still, it's kind of,
Yeah.
I don't know if that was what happened there. But
They
then, also that the second track was Theme of the Horror Boss. So I don't know if there was going to be like another boss encounter similar to, the final stage.
maybe.
So I don't know. I guess we'll never know, but that was interesting. And so anyway, and then there's not related to the music, but related to a scrap level. Um, the test footage before the game was released showed like a safari themed level. Maybe the Safari Zone, I
Ah,
don't know.
mm, that's
So,
cool.
some people speculate that maybe it was just meant to be a test level that where like you could kind of fit a lot of Pokemon in and it would make sense. Like a lot of different types of Pokemon.
Right.
Um,
Yeah,
but
I kind of feel like the river kind of
yeah, yeah,
carries that, and
yeah. But do you guys find it interesting that they chose 63 Pokemon to be in the game? Not like maybe 64 for the N64.
no, that is interesting. They could have just added one more and had that little connection because, as Pokemon fans know, there was, I guess, 151 in the original Gen 1 series, right?
Yeah.
So they significantly scaled that back for this game. And the game's relatively short. Maybe it's about 4 or 5 hours, and that's going back to levels a couple of times, right? I
Yeah,
mean,
if you just get through the game without like going for high scores and everything, like my total came out to 3 hours.
yeah. So I mean, they could
This
have theoretically made it longer.
Yeah, I wonder if it was a memory issue on the cartridge or if it was just,
Yeah, it could have
well,
been.
63 seems like a very arbitrary number.
Yeah, well, so yeah, I'm glad you circled back to that because in that test footage, Safari themed level, there was a Pokemon that did not make it, that was seen in that test footage that did not make it into the final game. So that was kind of the 64th that for some reason never made it.
Hmm.
So do you guys want to play Who's That Pokemon and guess which one that was?
We'll do that, but right when we come back. And for this week's mid-episode filler question, we're going to change things up a bit. Today we've been discussing Pokemon Snap, part of our offshoot Pokemon game category. And we decided to ask the listeners, what is your favorite offshoot Pokemon game? Don't give us red or blue, don't give us sword or shield. No suggestions, no would you rather, just let us know. It may wind up being one of the next two we're discussing in this genre. Hit us up at Instagram or X at Bros Boss Battles, our website at brothersandbossbattles.com, or leave us a comment wherever you get this podcast. Alright, now back to the episode. Alright, before the little break, Pete asked about. Well, Pete, you tell us. What did you ask?
Well, I was asking you, I mentioned that there was just only 63 Pokemon instead of 64, which seemed odd. And test footage before the game was released showed a Pokemon that did not end up in the final game. So I asked you guys if you wanted to play Who's That Pokemon and guess which one was scrapped.
All right, I'll go first. I'll run through a little bit of my logic. Well, actually, well, I found it interesting that the only main, th there's only one set of the three main ones. If you go with Bulbasaur, Charmander, and Squirtle, that have evolved forms. So you have all of the fire Pokemon evolved forms of Charmander, Charmeleon, and Charizard, but you only have the initial forms of both Squirtle and Bulbasaur in this game. So my initial thought was maybe it's one of those four other evolved versions of those other two, starter Pokemon. Then I was like, but I don't know if that's really that interesting. So then I was looking through the Generation 1 Pokemon list, and I was like, okay, it probably is someone without an evolved form because you could just stick them in and it wouldn't necessarily seem out of place. So I was looking at maybe Farfetch'd or a few others like that. But then I kind of decided when I came across this Pokemon that will be my guess, I thought, well, this is a weird Pokemon they could do a lot of things with. Perhaps they didn't like how it ended up and therefore took it out. So don't say anything because I want Tom to guess too. but my guess is Ditto.
Okay.
Not saying anything.
Yeah. So let me go. I didn't have as much of a thought process such like that one, but um I kept it a little simpler because we were talking about Safari area, and so I was thinking about back to like who was in the Safari Zone part of like Pokemon Red and Blue. So, I was thinking through, Chansey, but he was already in the game. Kangaskhan was already in the game. Um, but so then I landed on Taurus.
Hmm.
So that's my guess.
Taurus.
Yes.
Mhm. All right, Pete.
Hey, I like that logic, but Tom, you're wrong. And isn't Ditto in the game? Right,
Yeah, he's in that cave level. He's disguised as Bulbasaur's, I think,
right,
right?
right.
Yeah.
I think so, yeah.
Oh, okay. So before Pete reveals the answer, how do you get Ditto then? Because that's another one I missed, I guess.
I think you just have to throw a pester ball, right? Because the Ditto, as in the form of other Pokemon, as Pokemon fans would know, it's like the little dots for eyes, right? So
Oh,
he basically looks like Bulbasaur, but his eyes are just little black dots instead
Yeah.
of, you know.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure it's if you just throw a pester ball at him, then he'll
I think so. Yeah.
change
Then
into the
he
Ditto.
becomes, yeah,
ah,
Ditto.
Oh,
interesting.
so maybe we found another one of the four that you missed. It was four that you missed, right?
Five. That might
Five.
be the fifth
Okay.
one, actually. Yeah, that certainly was. Okay, so I wasted my pick. So
All right, so I'll just reveal. It's actually a pretty boring one. Ekans. Now
ah,
he's pretty prominent in the cartoon from Team Rocket, right? Golfing
Mhm.
was in the game, so maybe
hmm.
I don't know. Kind of a boring Pokemon, but he is prevalent in the cartoons.
My second guess was going to be Lickitung, who is also a Team Rocket
Mm,
Pokemon,
mm.
I was gonna.
but also wrong.
I was also thinking maybe Onyx was another one of those sort of standalones, at least at this non-evolving Pokemon, at least at this point in the game. That it could have
That could have
been.
been a good one, a good guess, but also would have been wrong.
Yep.
All right, anyway, that was fun. I hope.
So I kind of wanted to ask each of you, and I'll give my thoughts as well. But what was your, let's say, favorite part and least favorite part of this game, as far as like level and snapping Pokemon, not like big macro issues like about controls or graphics or whatever, but like just a specific part while playing.
All right, I'll go. I see Tom's thinking hard over there. Um, I like the special poses and figuring that out. Getting Pikachu to go on the surfboard. Or actually, you could get the Pikachu on the Articuno. I don't know if you guys caught that.
Yeah.
Um, you get him on the Electrode. I guess a lot of Pikachu stuff. But there's also other stuff like you could get the Pidgeys attacking Meowth, but then I think you could rescue Meow. There's a whole bunch of things.
Yeah, and there's a Zubat holding a Pikachu, and if you throw, I forget if it's the Pestiball or the food or both, but probably the Pestiball at the Zubat, and it's flapping in the air, so it isn't easy. But if you hit him, he drops the Pikachu, but instead of like falling to his death in the deep, cave that it is, he like starts floating on with the help of a bunch of balloons, and you can
With the
take a
balloons,
photo of
yeah,
that.
yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah, even like the coughing are chasing the different Jigglypuff, and then
yeah,
at the end you can get the three of them singing. Anyway,
right.
so that to me was the game. Just seeing a regular Pokemon and snapping them is kind of gets dull really fast. But trying to figure out how to get the special poses, I think, was the most fun.
Yeah. I'm just going to echo that. I think that, figuring out all those different poses and kind of like, I mean, they're kind of like Easter egg. I mean, not really, but, Easter egg-ish kind of, mechanics there where you have to kind of like think and actually figure out what to do. I mean, yeah, that was where pretty much all the fun came from this game.
I also want to echo what I said in my sort of initial thoughts. So, thinking back to when I first played this game, when I was 11 or 12 or whatever we were, I kind of just made fun of just seeing a Pokemon, on the beach and taking a picture. But actually, at that time, just doing that was pretty darn cool in 3D.
Yeah, because this is like the first 3D Pokemon game, and the graphics are actually pretty good. We'll get into it. I'll just go through, my little exercise here. So my least favorite part, and just because it took me a little bit of time, and N64 controls don't help, but there's the part in the valley, I believe it is, where you have to. There's a bunch of Squirtles that go into their shells and like rocket up a hill, and one of them sort of stays on the edge of the river sort of thing. And you actually have to position it where you hit him with the one of the balls. So he shoots up the hill, hits a Mankey. Mankey gets to a spot where you can then throw a ball at him, and he falls onto a switch that opens an additional level. So that was a pretty frustrating part because it kind of took me a little while to get that. Um, I really did like that level. I believe it was the cave that I referenced where you could hit the Zubat, um, holding the Pikachu, and you get a new pose, and hit the Weeping Bell into the pool of water, and that allows you to get Victory Bell. Um, the playing the flute for the Jinxes, and that unleashes Articuno in that
Yeah,
level. So,
Yeah, and
and
Ditto too is in that
you
level.
did.
yeah, Ditto, which I
Yeah.
didn't see.
And the
Um,
muck, the muck for me was like one of the last ones I got, even though I guess it's not that hard to figure out. Yeah, that was
uh,
a good level.
yeah, and then that's also where I think the special sign is. You see these bunch of like starry images, and you take a photo of that, and it actually ends up being a Mewtwo sign. So there's a lot in that level.
Yeah. One thing, this is a minor thing that I found lame was, well, first of all, why are all the legendary birds in eggs? That doesn't make sense. But the Moltres one is just like it's in the way and stops you, and then you have to hit it.
Yeah,
Like that was a little too basic.
I think it
Yeah.
was to kind of foreshadow that when you see eggs, you have to do something a little special. Because the other ones are
Yeah, yeah,
a little bit
yeah.
harder.
And the Moltres was I guess, the first of three, but I don't know. Could have made it maybe a little, not a little more challenging, but still easing the player into it.
Yeah, you actually encounter the Zapdos one first, right? It's in the second level. But I think you need
Oh,
the
maybe,
flute.
but I think you need the flute.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. So
exactly.
you
Yeah.
can't. That's the tunnel level. Yeah, you can't get them till later on.
Yeah, I was wondering about that too. Like why legendary birds are in eggs. I mean, I get it that birds hatch from eggs, but yeah.
So
I still don't get like the legendaries. Is it supposed to be that there's just one of them, you know, in existence? Anyway,
Yeah.
I don't know. But they certainly didn't look like newborn,
Yeah.
legendary birds. They seemed strong, powerful, and full grown. Anyway,
that'll be for our Pokemon discussion podcast that we don't have, but more fitting
yes,
for that, I think.
yeah.
So yeah,
That's a good idea.
I did want to briefly discuss the graphics because they were pretty good in this game, and I think that maybe that contributed to the fact that they were only able to have 63 as opposed to all of them, maybe because of size and programming limitations of the time. But, it's good that they made a game where taking photos was key to have good graphics that made you, want to take quality photos because the images of them were pretty strong, and their movements were pretty strong.
Yeah, no, I agree. The graphics are impressive, and certainly, like if this game was on Game Boy and you had sprites doing this exact same thing, it would not have been as appealing.
Yeah, yeah. There was a lot of different movements, flying, burrowing into the ground. Um, I One of the photos I took of Diglett was him like about to burrow into the ground, and that pose, gave me a lot of points when I brought the photo back to Professor Oak. So, you know, they're definitely quality graphics there.
Yeah, I mean photography is naturally or innately um, an aesthetic kind of thing. Or practice. So, obviously when you when you're taking a picture of something that is impressive aesthetically or graphically, it's gonna increase the experience for the user.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's interesting. This game kind of actually started off as a game called Jack and the Beanstalk, and it was like kind of a real quote unquote realistic photography game. And that was supposed to be released for uh this thing called the 64DD, which I think stands for disk drive or dynamic drive. Um, and that eventually got scrapped, of course, but it was intended to be like a peripheral for the N64. I think it would like attach to the bottom, and it did some things like it had like a real time clock type of thing. And this photography game was going to use that, and it was also going to involve like a system of like planting seeds or something. Then after a certain amount of time, they would grow. But anyway, that peripheral got scrapped, so then the game kind of really didn't have this direction. So I like naturally it was kind of like let's just add Pokemon to it, and
I'm sure it sold way better after
yeah,
all that than it
yeah,
would have if it wasn't Pokemon.
yeah. Well, this was I think the 11th best selling N64 game, so
Ah,
hard to imagine a photography game that wasn't snapping pictures of Pokemon would have done much better than that.
and we briefly mentioned it, but after you sort of beat that last level, you have to get photos of 6 Pokemon signs that appear in different levels before you go to the final Rainbow Cloud level, right?
Yeah, that sounds about right. I forget the exact number. 6 sounds right.
Yeah, there is 6. So for those that don't know, there's these 6 signs are not of actual Pokemon, but they're sort of
Yeah, things in the
the
environment
Yeah,
and the
environment that
landmarks.
landscape.
Yeah,
right. So there's like a mountain that looks like the Doug Trio. So you got to take a photo of that. So a couple were actually pretty difficult here.
The
There was
Kingler one, I think, there's like the rock formation of Kingler, and I think you have to kind of
mhm,
basically it's at the start of the level, if I remember, the beach level, but
in
you
the
have to kind of
beach.
turn around, which
Yeah,
is
you kind of taking it from after you've passed it, and you got to turn pretty much completely around in your
yeah,
vehicle to get it. The coughing one was pretty hard because you had to throw, I
that
believe it
was
was
hard.
pester balls into the volcano, one of those volcanoes in the volcano level, and like the puffs of smoke, every other puffs of smoke would look like coughing, but I missed it a couple of times, even when I knew that that's what I had to do. But just like snapping the photo, and it's like a really quick window of when it fully looks like a coughing.
Yeah,
So
because the smoke kind of like forms and then dissipates quickly. That
yeah,
was tough.
yeah, that was probably the toughest one. The Mewtwo one's pretty easy because I took a photo of those like starry images like in my first playthrough, and of course you even if you see it, any of these signs prior you're kind of locked out of getting it until you get to this point in the story, and then Professor Oak reveals that these are other things you could take photos of. So even if you saw it previously, you had to go back to actually take the photos.
Yeah, but I like that. It added a little something extra.
Yeah, and then eventually you get to the Rainbow Cloud level, which is Professor Oak's very excited about, and you there's one Pokemon there, and it's Mew. And you kind of it's sort of this is sort of almost like a little bit of an action sequence because you have to break the shield he's encompassed by throwing pester balls or the Pokemon food at him a certain amount of times, and then he comes out of his shield, and then while he's trying to get back in it, then you can snap the photo of him, and that sort of ends the game there after you.
yeah. Was there a way to get a good shot of him? I felt like I was always getting like his
Yeah,
just a
yeah.
picture of his
If you have to
back
keep hitting it with pester balls, and he
when
keeps
he's out
like
of the shot.
you when he's out of the shell, yeah. Then he kind of
Okay,
keeps like
he
pausing and turning around or
turns
whatever.
around. Gotcha.
And I think the 10,000 was the max points for Mew, and a bunch of
Uh,
people had that record. I think he's the highest
Yeah, because I think that
possible score in the game.
I think even if you don't get a great photo of him, you still get like 2,500 points.
Yeah,
So does anyone have their like final score
I
tallies?
don't know.
Do you have yours since you had the
I have
Pokemon?
mine.
So
You
mine was
mean the total report score?
yeah, the report score.
Yeah.
So mine was 159,610. I'm going to assume yours is more.
Mine was 166,380.
But
Pretty close, I think.
yeah, pretty close actually.
Do you happen to know what your best shots were? Like not the score if you don't have, but like at least like what Pokemon it was or what pose it was in or whatever.
From the top of my head, I don't know.
We'll get these
What?
posted on social media.
Yeah. But Tom, do you have
Yeah, mine was
a comment on that?
in the beach level Pikachu on the stump because
Mm.
like I think there's three Pikachu at that point, so it was like a
Uh,
modifier. That totaled 6,080 points for me, which
oh
probably isn't
wow.
that good, but
No, that's pretty good, I think. For us, non-professional photographers of Pokemon.
true. But yeah, I mean, there's probably other versions of Pikachu that get you better or higher scores.
Yeah,
I mean,
I
I got
think
some
the
of the other
best
ones
one
like,
is when he's on the
like
Articuno, and you could
yeah,
kind of like so one thing these like high score chasers do is they kind of I don't know if this cheesing the game, but if you move the C stick kind of back and forth real quick a bunch of times left and right, it'll significantly slow down the zero one. Is that what it's called?
Yeah.
It'll significantly slow it down, so that kind of helps you get better pictures of some of the Pokemon. But anyway, so
hmm,
I think you have to
that's lame.
utilize that in the Articuno one, but it's actually kind of it's a position. It creates a position where the Articuno with the Pikachu on its back will fly kind of like directly over you, and basically you're taking a picture like through the Articuno. Like there's basically a frame or two where the Articuno isn't visible, but the Pikachu is.
Uh,
And I think that's like the highest score you could get because you have this special pose, and then you could get him like very large and clear because the
yeah.
Articuno isn't in the way.
The there are a couple of cool things. Like I know I got one of Magmar's fighting that was a bunch of points, and if you can get the electrode exploding, um, that gives you some good points too. But yeah, we'll get those up on our social media, um, for the listeners to take a look at.
Yeah, I'll have to go back and see what my highest scores were.
I'd be curious to see if we had still our save file on the N64 cartridge. And do you happen to know
You
if we
you
did?
you did, but like classic Pokemon, you have to delete that in order to save another
Oh,
game. So
gotcha.
so I since I
So
played
that's
on
lost
that,
forever.
yeah,
I don't
sorry.
remember kind of like I don't remember
Yeah, I don't know if we were
chasing high
really like,
scores in
yeah,
this. I remember enjoying this game and playing it a lot, but I don't remember chasing high scores.
yeah, that's true.
Yeah, this wasn't like
Yeah.
the 101% complete in Donkey Kong 64.
Yeah. That we can never delete.
Nope.
Yeah, there was like there's a lot of things like that, like the graveler dancing, like dancing in the group. I think maybe it was just if you do the poker flute, hear them, I forget. But anyway. Yeah, so another thing I wanted to mention was do you guys remember or Tom, you probably do, and maybe you don't, like the Blockbuster printing stations, like these giant kiosks that they had.
I didn't remember it, but I actually did see that just when I was doing a little bit of research on the game. But
Uh,
yeah.
Yeah, I had
yeah, I mean,
forgotten
because
about that. I remember they used
oh
to have
really?
the
Because remember, and then you could print out like you can make little printouts of the shots that you took,
oh
the
yeah,
photos that you
yeah,
took.
yeah.
Yeah, so that just added to the craze, Pokemon craze and all this game. Yeah, it was a kiosk, and you could play like a little demo if you didn't have a game, let's say, and then you could print out your photos that you took in that demo, or you could bring your cartridge and print out photos from your actual game.
Yeah, I didn't remember that you could actually bring your cartridge. I remember like the key. I remember like being able to play the game in stores.
Yeah,
Yeah, I had forgotten about the actual printing though. But yeah, I remember that now.
yeah,
Yeah,
and yeah. It was this giant like kiosk, like bigger than an arcade cabinet. I think some lucky people like just got them. You know, so
For
some
home?
people maybe were managers of Blockbusters, but
Ah.
some of them,
Oh,
I think this story's like, people found them in a dumpster. Probably when the
wow.
Blockbuster closed.
wow.
Yeah,
We
That's
did that
crazy.
when we were young, right? The printing of the photos.
maybe we did it once or twice.
I
Yeah,
think
I think
yeah, I
so.
seem to recall having.
We did have a
Does it make them into
Blockbuster near where we
stickers?
used to live.
It was stickers, yeah.
Yeah. I remember I put them on my now it's all coming back to me. I put them on my Pokemon card binder.
Uh, yes, yes. Yeah, I think it was
Yeah, that's
$3 for
cool.
a sheet of 16 stickers from based on my research. Not based on my memory, based on my research.
Not a bad deal.
Yeah. Wasn't there like a printer, or maybe that was on like Game Boy or something? I thought there was another peripheral where you could print out stuff, but maybe not.
Yeah, I think there was something for Game Boy.
Yeah, for Game Boy, not for N64.
Yeah, cool stuff. Pokemon always seems to be able to integrate into other forms of, either media or just peripherals in order to just get the name out more, get the characters seen by more eyeballs and all of that.
Yeah, it was just so popular, like that no matter what they did, it was gonna be somewhat successful.
And there was I'll just mention this because I don't think anyone has played it, but there was a new Pokemon Snap released in 2021 for the Nintendo Switch. I
Yeah, I
haven't
played
played.
it.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, I didn't finish it. So I had got it when it was first released. I was actually pretty excited about it. And it was actually surprising to me that it took so long for a sequel.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But
given how
anyway,
many generations there was between
yeah, yeah,
Gen 1 and whatever. Was it 2 years ago, you said?
2021.
2021.
Yeah.
3 years ago.
Yeah. So I kind of got bored with it fairly quickly. Um, and they did a lot of things different, like, and maybe we'll review that game one day. So I'm not gonna get too much into it, but like every Pokemon had sort of a 1, 2, 3, and 4 star shot that you could take, but it wasn't necessarily like it was a little bit, but it wasn't necessarily like 1 star meant it was a poor shot and 4 star meant it was a great shot. It was like kind of you had to force them to do different things to categorize them into the different. So it was very like I just felt like you had to grind a lot and like you had to go back 100 times to get the same shots or different shots of the same Pokemon. But
Right.
but the graphics were amazing.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah.
Yeah, that was definitely like the highlight of the game for me. It was pretty cool.
An actual VR game of that would probably be cool
Oh yeah, yeah,
and probably doable, especially if you do it on Rails, because it doesn't seem like too intensive otherwise.
yeah. You're right. It should be doable. I think they got rid of pester balls maybe because I was too like
Negative.
offensive
Yeah.
to yeah cruel too cruel,
Yeah.
and they use these aluminum orbs instead, which kind of like make the Pokemon illuminate.
Ah.
And yeah, then maybe they do different things. So yeah,
All right.
another cool thing I
Yeah.
I found in doing some research about the game. This isn't strictly a Pokemon Snap thing, but do you guys remember maybe when we took family vacations when we were younger, in hotels, like they're either playing like these Nintendo games or just seeing like a console that had them.
Yeah, like under lock and key with the hotel TV sort of thing.
Yeah, yeah, with the hotel. Yeah, I have a vague recollection of that. Um,
Yeah, I seem
but
to recall that. We were never
yeah,
allowed to
yeah.
play them though.
So
No. Yeah. Because
yeah,
what
so
did it wasn't it like I don't know, a substantial amount of money to play for like 15 minutes or something like.
yeah, probably. Yeah.
Yeah, I would imagine so.
Yeah. Because so in 1993, Nintendo launched this like Nintendo Gateway system, they called it. And basically that was like a network of games that would be in like hotels and I think airplanes too. And basically then they partnered with this company called LodgeNet. And I won't get into that, but LodgeNet was kind of like I don't know, there was like a um not a database, but like a server or something with these different games, like the Super Nintendo games, N64 games. I think it even went up to GameCube in the later years.
Hmm.
Um, and it's kind of cool because you could go online and there's an archived webpage of the Nintendo Gateway system. And so you could see like all the games that were available, and like each game has a page dedicated to it and kind of has like a 1 page like gaming sheet that shows like the description of the game and the controls and like some tips and tricks, I think.
Nice.
Um, but anyway, so like Pokemon Snap was included in this, like, and it was kind of just before like the holiday season, so it was like a big promotion for the game. and it kind of worked well because it was a simple game, so it kind of worked well in kind of a system like that.
Yeah, game like this would do well for that.
Yeah, yeah. So anyway, I had done that research and I figured there probably won't be another game that we ever talk about that'll give me the opportunity to mention that. So
Yeah, nice. All right. I mean, does anyone have anything else to add? If not, we can maybe move on to final thoughts. All right. Tom, why don't you lead us off on final thoughts and whether you recommend this or not to our listeners?
Yeah, overall, I think it's a solid game. Especially, I mean, if you're into Pokemon, definitely. I mean, back in the day, it was great. For a Pokemon fan, like Pete mentioned, first foray into 3D Pokemon, which was awesome. These days, I mean, I think it held up pretty well. I enjoyed playing through it again, and, rediscovering all the secrets to getting the Pokemon to either appear or do different poses and stuff. So yeah, I mean, it was fun. There's a lot of actual like intricacy there, which you might not expect from a game like this. So that was cool. Yeah, I mean, I think it's going to be a lot more appealing to Pokemon fans, obviously. So I would definitely recommend it to a Pokemon fan who hasn't played. If you're not a Pokemon fan, well, what's wrong with you? You should be. It's a great series.
Thanks, Tom. I'll go next. Tom pretty much summed it up, and I'll say this first. I'll give my recommendation first before expanding on my final thoughts. But I would recommend this to a Pokemon fan. I would not recommend it to someone who doesn't like or doesn't know anything about Pokemon. I think it's a good game. I mean, the graphics are good. The concept is cool because it's different um, than both Pokemon and video games in general, but more so different than video games in general because you can kind of compare it to the Pokemon lore by saying, instead of catching them in these little Pokeballs, you're catching them in photographs. And it has a lot of replayability as far as the different items you get and how that helps you interact differently within each level and with different Pokemon. And just trying to get higher scores, trying to beat your own scores. And, as Pete mentioned, there are like these communities where people try to one up each other with the high scores. So it's a good game. It's short, but has that replayability. Um, Controls aren't great, but they're certainly not bad and certainly sufficient for a game of this nature. But at the end of the day, I just don't see a non-Pokemon fan getting much out of this. Uh, Pokemon fan, play it. If not a Pokemon fan, probably want to pass. All right, Pete, finish us off here with your final thoughts and recommendation.
all right, yep. So I mean, if you're a pretty big Pokemon fan, you've probably already played this game. But for someone who maybe is like Ant, who likes Pokemon, knows Pokemon, has played some of the games, but isn't necessarily a huge fan, and especially being Gen 1, he knows that one the best. If you're kind of like that, I would definitely recommend the game as well. And yeah, the game I feel did hold up pretty well. Going back and playing a game that's you've played 20, over 20 years ago, you kind of have you start to you do question whether or not, the nostalgia factor is blinding or masking a true opinion of the game. And so when you go back and play it, sometimes it's a disaster. And that definitely was not the case with Pokemon Snap. It's a good, solid game. And I think if you've played this before, go back and play it for nostalgia's sake. And if you have any sort of affinity towards Pokemon and haven't played it, then you definitely should. You definitely should pick it up.
All right, thanks, Pete, and thanks, Tom. Thank you, everyone, for listening. This has been Pokemon Snap on Brothers and Boss Battles. Stay tuned. In a couple of weeks, we'll be discussing our second offshoot Pokemon game in this category. In the meantime, visit us on X or Instagram at Bros Boss Battles. That's BROS Boss Battles. You can visit our website at brothersandbossbattles.com. Drop us a comment on any of those services or wherever you listen to this podcast. keep a lookout for the photographs or at least mentions of our top Pokemon snap catches. We'll share that with the community and hope to have you come back and listen to our next offshoot Pokemon episode. All right, everyone, take care.